On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Peter Maynard. He is the Chief Data and Analytics Officer at Guardian Life. We're going to be talking about thinking differently. And what do I mean by that? Well, everyone has AI as some kind of initiative. If you're a software company, you're building it. If you're a company that consumes technology, you're figuring out how to use it. And the real key is, how do you adjust to take advantage of these opportunities? How do you adjust that playbook? How do you communicate that to stakeholders? And what happens to your team? They've got to actually be a part of this process to deliver. So Peter's here to talk to us about all this stuff. We'll see how far we get. Peter, thanks for your time.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. All right, before we start, Guardian Life, what do you guys do over there?
Yeah, so we're a life insurance company that's been around for 160 years. And we provide, I would say, two categories of services. One is for consumers directly. So we have direct-to-consumer business where we sell life insurance policies, disability policies. We also have annuity wealth management products. And we have agents and sales leaders who work with clients to help set them up for their future and take care of, the things that matter to them in terms of their livelihoods, loved ones, and those sort of things. The second business we have is our group business. So it's a business-to-business that works with employers and provides services as well as capabilities for their employers to serve their employees. So think of things like dental insurance, life insurance, disability insurance for your employees. We also have supplemental health and other key services. A big one right now is absence and helping through family medical leave and those sort of services for employers, and how to help their employees through certain transitions and certain life events. So we provide a lot of work there. And then what my team focuses on is the data products, the AI products, to help in serving those customers and identifying the customers and getting them things that they need to achieve their life outcomes. And so wellness, financial wellness, and then health wellness is really important to us as a company.
Awesome. Well, I have come to understand a bit about insurance companies as I've been having a few guests from the area, just the complexity, lots of dynamics, obviously AI. I had somebody on from a startup working on risk ops, and seems like the opportunities are just abound. And I guess, in the vein of this topic, thinking differently, and I guess right before we hit record, I was mentioning it's one thing to start a project where there's nothing there. You can make decisions from scratch. You can make, decisions in a vacuum or less implications, less constraints. You have some options. When you're an organization, you guys are 160 years in business. There's a lot of processes in place. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of complexity. Talk to us about when you see a new technology come to market. It doesn't even have to be AI. It could just be a technology. And you have to start thinking about, how do you incorporate that into the business? You've got to adjust your playbook. You've got to adjust some of the things the way it's traditionally been done. I guess at the highest level, maybe let's start there.
Yeah, well, it's a great question. And what I tell people is that the job I signed up for with Guardian, I started in November 2022, literally a week before the public announcement of ChatGPT. And so my job description completely changed. And what was interesting for me is, there's always this kind of reflection: is the world changing? How am I changing in that world, right? And kind of what's different about it, and those sort of things. And for me, one of the seminal moments is when literally I was in my kitchen, my wife looked up to me and asked, "What's this thing, ChatGPT?" I'm like, "Whoa, okay, this is getting to a level of public consciousness." And that was during the holiday break. So that was within a month of the job. And so for me, I was like, well, I need to really pay attention to this because it's now in the public conscious. And when I say pay attention, begin to internalize how Guardian can actually leverage this technology. And so you asked about, thinking differently, operating differently. It is, as human beings, we have our filters, we have our observations, we have our conceptualized reality. And and this kind of gets into Thomas Kuhn and paradigms, how do you view the world? But how do you challenge your existing paradigms, be open to new paradigms, be open to different thoughts? How do you challenge the process, challenge your thinking? I call that learning. That's just lifelong learning. And it's easy to get absorbed in the day to day, but not only do you have to, and this is like kind of, if you think about leadership, there's self leadership, there's team leadership, and there's the organization, and there's an industry leadership, those 4 levels. You got to start with the self and take care of the self around how are you challenging your rigidity, your biases, your approach, and exposing yourself to newness so you're knocked off center, not in a bad way, not in a disruptive way, but in a way that forces you to go, oh, wait, there's something different here. How can I learn into this and adapt to this and acknowledge the new environment I'm in? But then you have to do that with your teams and get them to see and get them to, get those things to get to reveal to them such that you can begin to move forward as an organization. So that thinking differently, I like to think of like, then how do you begin to act differently, right? So there's the thinking of it, there's their awareness, and then there's the action, right? But you have to get them to turn to go, wait, there's this thing called GPT. Maybe I should learn more about that and begin to internalize that. Yeah.
I love the way you explained, obviously, the component of the self here. And you had a great story that your wife actually was becoming aware of GPT, which signaled to you, hey, this thing actually is growing. And I think my wife now uses ChatGPT to vet all her emails going out, so it's become a part of her daily workflow. And I'm seeing that growth with everyone around me. When you start seeing something like that, and I guess it might feel different, and this is like internal to yourself, you obviously might not have a background in AI. You might have a background in AI. This could be a general question of, applicably to others. Like, where do you start personally as a leader to go, hey, you know what? I need to get my arms around this. I need to understand the scope, the depth, because obviously if you're too high level, it sounds really cool, which it does. If you get too stuck in the weeds, you may never come back because it is the rabbit hole of rabbit holes. How do you deal with that?
My training is actually in economics, and I did a lot of econometrics, and then a lot of model building and leading teams that did that. And so my comfort space is downloading white papers and articles and start reading. And what I did during that, the couple of weeks of when people were off and visiting family and all that kind of stuff, I downloaded an article that was basically, here's what's really going on in LLMs. So I read that. I probably understood 50% of it. I then talked to the lead data scientist on my team, and I spent time. So I learned there's learning through reading, and then there's learning through conversation. And as I was thinking about our conversation today, because I was kind of thinking about like, how do I learn? How do I and I've found that in my career, people will flip me decks around our presentations and then be like, oh, you've been learning, like, here you go, it's in the deck, and it's like, well, now that's not learning. That shows me some content. But what was really helpful is his name is Shaheen, who leads he walked me through, and he did the translation for me. He's like, hey, this is what it's doing compared to machine learning. He did a little bit of translation. This is how machine learning does things. This is what the LLM's doing. And then I was like, whoa. I'm like, okay, so now I understand kind of the inner guts of it. So I learned through people, and I learned through, articles and reading articles. I'm a voracious reader of things that are new. I'll get on listserv. I'm going to call them listservs anymore. It shows my age, but get on these sort of, newsletters and those sort of things. And I'll read information and download it. And then, social media is good because you see what other people are forwarding on things, but it's, trying to understand. And then for me, contextualize, okay, not in a way to diminish its contribution, in a way to understand its contribution. Because some people will go like, oh, GPT is just like NLP. It's just the same thing as NLP, right? It's just, it's the same thing. And it's a reductionist view as opposed to, no, it's actually different. Here's why it's different. So I like to look at things and say, okay, well, understand why it's different, not try to conform it to my paradigm, but more to go, okay, how does this change how I think about the way that we do work, and what is the type of work that we can do? but it's human nature to go, okay, this is just like if you learn a new language. Oh, this language is just like this other language. Well, no, it's not. It's different. It's built on a completely different culture, completely different country. There may be some syntax is the same, but like, or pronunciations that are the same, but no, it's different. You need to understand the differences. So it's a continual battle, though. It's not easy to get that, and also not to get complacent with where you learn and how you learn. Like, how do you find, if you have your superhighway of your information knowledge, get off that superhighway and find a different thing. And that's where, kind of, what are our news feeds? What are, like, find something else, find something orthogonal that you wouldn't normally see, and see how people, that's why I love universities, because you talk to somebody in the language arts, they're going to have a different version of what GPT does for them compared to someone in data science, right? But they both are going to have some interesting things that you can learn from that.
I'm going to ask you a bit of a question off tangent, but kind of related to what you mentioned. So you do have a PhD, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Because I saw it on your LinkedIn. I just want to make sure I didn't get it wrong. You obviously have to, in economics, you have to go through complex math modeling.
Yeah.
So in your current role, obviously, if we were to kind of look at the leadership required in a chief data analytics officer before, it had a different context to me. If you're looking at the chief data analytics officer now, and all of a sudden, I'm not saying the role has to be technical, but the subject of for you to sit down and look at the difference between, a machine learning output, the LLM, you have to understand some of the inner workings to really conceptualize it. Not necessarily. You can also understand the output without understanding how the cake's baked. Fine. When you're looking at yourself and how you need to impart your learnings back to the company so the company can start thinking differently, is that background slowly going to start shifting within potentially the data world, where this technical component, the more engineering like component, is that going to come into play? Or is this just the beginning and the beginning of everything? If we go back to the beginning of the web, it was Gopher. You have to be a little bit technical to get on Gopher. It wasn't just as easy as point and click. And then obviously tools came, and, facilitation and ease of use came, and adoption increases. Are we just seeing the beginning of what, I just aged myself of Gopher, but I think people will be like, what the heck's Gopher out there? But Google it, you'll see how hard it was one day. I guess, does that question make sense?
I think so. Yeah. So let me reflect back because it's interesting. Like, what is the technical or functional leadership I have to have in a role? And that's something I think about quite a bit, because, do I need to be in the matrix algebra in the machine learning world, right? Do I need to be in the matrix algebra? And what's curious to me about the predictive transformers is that's probably the first time in my career where it's gone way beyond the mathematics and the training I've had, right? Where most of the stuff all the way up into machine learning, it's always been variants of kind of the same thing, deep learning variants of the same thing. I did neural nets back in 99, right? So I'm like, okay, I kind of understand this. I kind of understand the math here. But what was fascinating when I was talking to Shaheen is that he said basically at the like the way we talked about it and what the predictive transformers are doing is that there's these sparse matrices. And what it's enabling us to do is to deal with those sparse matrices in a really elegant way and still be highly predictive. Which, if you think about it, right, if you're doing matrix inversion and you have a whole bunch of zeros and you don't have any observations in the matrix, then that becomes a major liability. But in this case, again, this is just me, beginner here, right? And this just kind of conceptualize how, and we kind of joked, we're like, it all comes down to linear algebra again, right? And so we kind of talked about like, and that foundation doesn't change in a way, like that mathematical foundation doesn't change. And that I think is just so important to anyone in this career. Get your math, understand the mathematics, because the applications, but if you go down to the root of it, to what is really going on, it's some of these core mathematical manipulations, principles are at work. And that is something that doesn't disappear. Like that's just something that I, as a leader, I need to make sure, even if I don't know the mechanics specifically, I have to understand conceptually. And what I also like, the thing that I joke with people about is I go, hey, let's make sure we talk about the science and data science. What's our research agenda? What are we learning? What are our hypotheses? Let's not get caught up in just the techniques, but how are we in our accuracy? How are we in our recall? How are we on the performance? Do we understand what is driving the model and understand when we change the inputs, how it changes the outputs? Like those are concepts. It doesn't matter where your training's from, your technical background is. Like you need to understand those sort of things. And I think that's really critical, and so I always look at that and kind of say, okay, I don't want to lose my edge, but I recognize I haven't built models in years. So there's only so much I can do. But I also do it because I want to be a good steward for them and for the team because, I'm the only executive in a conference room of like 20 people who can articulate why this is important, why the function, the craft is important, why we need to invest in these things. So I need to be able to work with them about what is it that they need in those generating the algorithms or the models. And, for example, we're looking at, testing these different models. What's the difference in the 70 billion parameter model versus 700 billion parameter? Why should the business care? And so that's where I need to be at the table with the business and know the technical stuff so I can articulate the value of the technical, like improving the technical stuff so the business stuff can happen. And that's really important. So.
Yeah, and I like how you explained that. And I think going back to obviously the theme of thinking differently, when you're sitting at the table, you're in the room, you do have the benefit of understanding some of the underlying moving parts, and they don't. Not everyone has to understand it. They have to understand implications. I mean, you guys have been in business for a while. I mean, there's processes that have been built. There's culture that gets established. Helping a company that is in the insurance space that probably, I could be unfairly characterizing it, but typically a little risk averse. They don't want to be on the bleeding edge of things. How do you help an organization start seeing that opportunity and positioning it so that obviously it's not an inflated view of a savior, it's going to come in and revolutionize things, but here are the practical things that if we stay a little bit further on the forefront of things, we're going to see benefits.
Yeah. So the first thing is you really have to work back from the business's like value chain, their customer flow. You have to know your business. You really, really have to know your business well. And that way you can, when you're, because in a way we're pitching, we're selling a new future for them, right? We're saying, hey, if you have this capability, if you have this service, if we can do this for you, this will make life better, faster, cheaper, higher quality, right? And so you really have to be able to understand that. And my work as a leader is just not me understanding the business; is having all my teams understand the business. Like that's the key is for them so that they can make offers. We call it being offer makers into the business. Go, hey, did you know that with this machine learning algorithm or with this model or with this new AI solution, we can hasten the time to underwrite a policy. Did you know that? Or we can bring in new data that can allow you to have a better predictive accuracy. And so those are the sort of things that we can then say, we see that this is taking a month, we can make it happen in a day, sort of thing. So that's the sort of work that is really important for us to really understand the business so that when we know we filter ourselves like, hey, is this going to be worth it? Is this going to be valuable to them? Is this going to be something like this is a big problem or a little problem, right? So I feel like that's really important. The other thing is building the relationships with your business partners so that they, this is the kind of the downtime along the water cooler or the coffee pot in the office where you start chatting with folks and like building a relationship, building that familiarity. So when we come up with these ideas, they're more easily accepted, right? Because they see us, they trust us, so that's really, really big. But it's really leading with their problem, not leading with the solution, that I think is important. And then also talking about, well, hey, I've seen a proof of concept that, because we have, partners that come to us and say, hey, we can help you with these things. And here's some partners who've done some stuff. And this is the performance they got out of it, right? So we'll say, oh, did you hear that X company was doing something and they used it and this is what they saw? Do you think that'd be interesting to you? So those sort of so it's kind of the power of revealing those opportunities, I think, is really, really important. But you have to connect with them at a very tactical level around, hey, we're doing X today, we could really help you do Y. And so we've done a lot of work around that in terms of our sales pipeline process, right? It's like very laborious, a lot of paperwork, right? And so, gosh, if we could, everyone's happier. The customers are happy if there's less paperwork. We're happier if there's less paperwork. It's faster turnaround times. Like those are the sort of use cases that are, really powerful, where we can say, look, we can really help you here. And then, and then that trust then builds. Well, what about this one? And then what about this one? And then we're like, okay, yeah, we can do that too. But it's for us, that's the joy in the work, is revealing opportunities for people to be, smarter about what they can do. So, yeah.
I like that. I think a lot of times people think speed of an execution over that trust factor makes a difference. I think that trust factor, once they believe that you can deliver consistently, you're delivering the results that benefit them, helping them adopt, I think it's that subsequent project work and subsequent phases that becomes so much easier. I guess final question, I know you got to get back to it. If you were thinking about yourself, and I guess thinking differently, and you mentioned about the science back in data science, how are you helping your team to have, I don't know if it's time or the ability to sit there and think differently to solve different problems? Because obviously they're busy doing their day job, but obviously if you want to solve different problems, someone has to, at some level, have the time to actually chase down some of those solutions and figure out how to get there.
It's a constant challenge with organizations, because there's the deliverables that are right in front of you that you have to execute on. And so how do you create the space, and the space to think, the space to operate, the space to tinker, right? And so, for me, that offer making culture is really important. So one of the things I say to my team is that you always need to have a business customer for every work that you do. What does that mean? What that means is that you're not just tinkering off on the side or experimenting off on the side, but you have a person who's vested in your success. And so it's really easy if I'm building a model to improve my marketing, the marketing leaders of the customer, and we're working for that. But what I will do is I'll support incubation with my teams and my leaders for them to incubate and say to their teams, hey, you need 10% of your time to be working on you, improving yourself, improving, you coming up with those ideas. And then those ideas are what become the innovations of the future. My job is to make that space. It's really hard. I could be doing a better job of it, but my job is to incubate those ideas. In fact, I have a meeting coming up. We have a team meeting coming up on Tuesday, where we're going to be talking about some of the transformative ideas that the team has come up with, and how do we actually reveal those opportunities to the business as strategic opportunities and partner with them and co-design that with them. So we're going through this is, we want to begin that process of enrolling them in that co-design. That's specifically because we think it's such a big opportunity. And so, but that's really my beginning junior managers, like, they need to create the space for their direct reports to do that. And when I hear that they don't, that the people are grinding, I'm like, all right, well, stop, team. We need to kind of give people some space. Hey, they're done with the project, add an extra week of buffer into the timeline so they don't start the next week. Give them time to experiment, because that's when you get, now people also do this through hackathons. They do it through other means, and you can have those structure things, but there's a lot of value in those things. I still joke, like the best model you build is the one after the one that you just built is the second model you build, right? So anytime you build a model, you discover what's on the cutting room floor and what and then so sometimes I'll have people go like, I just built a model. I'm like, build it again. Give you a month. Go. And it's like, really? Yeah, build it again. See what you do. And it's like, oh, but I just finished. Yeah, but like, I know you are capable of more. You want to do more. You have different things. Let's see what happens. Because sometimes the production deployment takes forever. And you could just like, we'll just insert this new one in here. So it's a little bit it's just creating the space for that conversation, creating that space. But as leaders, we have to create that space because that unleashes the human potential that we all have, right? If people are just going through it on the treadmill, that's really no fun. It's when people come up with stuff that they discover, that's the joy of the job, quite frankly. So it's creating it. And it's hard. Oh my gosh, is it hard? It's not easy, right? But it's fun too. So that's the good part about it.
I love it. I love it when a leader comes on and you can sense the passion for the team going out and having that ability to execute, whether it's through a hackathon or, as you mentioned, a buffer, because you're investing in your team so they can deliver more, which I think, I wish we'd see a lot more often, but amazing stuff, Peter. I really do appreciate you coming on and sharing with us. If someone wants to reach out to you to kind of pick your brain on anything you mentioned, what is a good way to touch base with you or connecting with you?
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn. I'm there, and so easily connect with me there. I'm also at Guardian as well, but the LinkedIn is probably the easiest way to connect with me. So, yeah.
Okay, we'll definitely include that in the show notes, the links to connect with you on LinkedIn. And again, appreciate your time. Thank you for that.
Thank you for the thoughtful questions. I just, this is great. So I love the approach. I love the style. So this is awesome.
I appreciate you willing to answer long-winded and adjacent questions. So I appreciate your time. So thank you very much. It's always great to have a guest that's diving into areas and uncovering things. So thank you for that.
Oh yeah, my pleasure.
So that's it for the episode. We'll be back again, different guest, different topic. Until then, two things. One, I think thinking differently was a great theme for this episode. I think Peter did a great job of walking us through how he thinks differently, how that impacts the organization, his team. Share it with somebody else. I think it was a great topic, and I'm glad we were able to have Peter on to share that with us. Like, subscribe, comment, review. Let me know how the podcast is going for you. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.